This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
Hey, welcome into a Monday edition. The Warm-Up, Josh Hennig, 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Got a lot to get into in 1 hour to get to it. Coming up at 1:25, we'll go over the Phillies weekend. Frank Klose, our 97.3 ESPN Phillies insider. Phillies had exhibition games versus the Nationals and the Orioles over the weekend. Getting with Frank, where is he going with this batting lineup? It feels like Girardi's going with some different variations each day. We got our Phillies and baseball stuff to get into with Frank coming up at 1:25. Plus, this hour, we got to get to what's going on with the NFL. Jalen Reagor in the house. He has signed his new deal. We'll get to the terms of that deal momentarily. Plus, Giannis or LeBron. So the NBA has announced that the voting for the season awards only will go off of the games that happened before the shutdown. The 8 games leading to the playoffs are not part of the voting process. So looking into all of that and more coming up this hour here on the Warm-Up 97.3 ESPN. Text board open, 609-403-0973. Off the top here, we do want to hit on the little news about Jalen Reagor. The Eagles and their rookie wide receiver have agreed to a deal. And it's your typical rookie deal, more so as a formality than anything else. It wasn't like, there was some big money agreement. Because the way it works now is that you're pretty much a tiered system. It's not like back in the day where you're just trying to negotiate the most money possible if you're number one overall pick, for example. But Reagor, your standard 4-year rookie deal, worth $13.3 million. He's in the house. He's reporting. But the fact that he's there and he's reporting is part of what the issue is for the players right now. You may or may not have seen over the weekend trending on Twitter, #WeWantToPlay. And it wasn't just one or two or a couple NFL players. It was a plethora of NFL players from Drew Brees, the J.J. Watt, the Todd Gurley, Jarvis Landry, Myles Garrett, all of these guys getting in on this #WeWantToPlay. And this gets back to the conversation we started having over the weekend, which was as we approach the players coming back, it seems like there is a incredible disagreement when there really shouldn't be between the players and the owners in terms of the safety protocols to return. Now, today, players as they're coming to the facility, specifically the Texans and the Chiefs, as well as other rookies around the NFL, like Jalen Reagor's in the house today, they're all getting COVID-19 tested. But the problem isn't getting tested once. It's the fact that you have to be tested again and again and again in order to ensure that everybody involved is safe. Well, the problem is that if you're not going to test daily and you're going to test potentially every other day or every 72 hours, there is a window of opportunity for someone to test positive, be asymptomatic, contract, and spread. Now, according to Adam Schefter earlier today, the owners are meeting at 2 o'clock Eastern today to try to finalize health and safety measures, financial arrangements, and then discussing the reduction or elimination of preseason games. Now, the players don't want any preseason games. The league wants at least one, according to multiple reports. So there's a lot to digest here, but I will start with this. This is not the same as the baseball situation a couple months ago. Because baseball players and owners were arguing about money. They were arguing about being paid. They were arguing about the financial aspect of all this. The players don't seem to be too bent out of shape over the money aspect. Their concern is the safety protocols of the thing. And I find it very interesting that the NFL has insisted on going about this way, despite the fact that it was back in April and May that the NFL and the NFLPA doctors who have been a part of this sports task force to return to sports have been in on all the discussions. Both sides are knowledgeable of what is going on. Both sides understand what the NBA is doing, what the NHL, the MLS, what other sports are doing. They see what's going on with baseball. They've seen what other sports have done around the world. So they should by now know what works and what doesn't. But despite that, on July 20th, there is this gap between the players and the owners, or at least the league in terms of when it comes to the protocols with safety. And first of all, I can't blame the players at all for the safety protocol issue because let's be realistic. You're not in a bubble. You don't have the opportunity to isolate yourself like you do with the NBA and the NHL. I mean, the UFC Fight Island was almost like a quarantined zone, basically, in order for you to come in and fight. The NFL isn't doing anything like those other entities are doing. And part of it is because of the number of players they have coming in and out. But part of it also is because, for whatever reason, the NFL doesn't think it's necessary. And I think that's where the rub really is. Remember, the medical head doctor for the NFL Players Association is Dr. Tom Mayer. Dr. Tom Mayer is a guy who worked for the Pentagon. He's been involved in numerous disaster situations and dealing with protocols for different issues at a government level. He's the one advising the players what the protocols should or shouldn't say. So there's no opportunity for anyone to dupe the players, misinform the players, put them, in any type of box or try to manipulate them. You have a guy who is experienced at the highest levels in terms of dealing with serious issues like an infectious disease that we still don't have all the answers for, honestly. So for the league to try to get around doing what needs to be done with a players association is really dumb. Just give the players what they want. If the players say we want daily testing, what are you going to complain about? Money? The NFL makes more money per year than the other sports do. They have plenty of money. And if the NBA and the NHL and baseball can pull this off, then the NFL can absolutely pull this off. And I think that's where I don't understand what the NFL's goal is. It just seems like the NFL just doesn't get it. Now, listen, when they have this meeting at 2 o'clock today, for however long it's going to take, they may figure it out, right? They may, sit down and be like, hey, this is what they're telling us we have to do. We might as well give them what they're asking for. Maybe. You would hope that's what it would come down to, because this is not an issue of money. This is not an issue of that kind of stuff that baseball was arguing about that was completely tone deaf and frivolous at the time. No, this is an issue of the United States is the one country that hasn't gotten our COVID-19 positive test rate into a range that is manageable. While other countries around the world are not having the problems that the United States is having with the number of the test rates per population, per state, per whatever stat you want to use. They're all just not looking good. So if you're someone who looks at those numbers and it concerns you, then if you're the NFL, you have to look at the players and say, these guys are asking for something specific. And if you break down what the players' union has outlined in their ramp-up proposal, 21 days of strength and conditioning work, 10 days of non-padded practices, 14 days of contact acclimation, where you put the pads on and practice will go on. Well, the only issue, I think, for the NFL is that that timetable puts you right before the start of the season. And the NFL, as the league, wants to get at least one preseason game in, according to reports. So it's going to be very interesting to see if these sides decide to find some sort of middle ground in the next 24 to 48 hours. And, of course, we'll be covering it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, myself, Sports Bash Mike Gill, Hunter Brody, 2 to 6 all week long. Football at 4. Today's Jeff Mosher right here on 97.3 ESPN. Remember, it was Jeff Mosher who had the story on Friday evening into Saturday morning that Jalen Reagor was flying to Philadelphia to sign his contract and start taking his COVID testing, get himself into the protocol. So Mosher joins the guys. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, coming up at 4 p.m. today. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Again, coming up at 1:25. Phillies insider Frank Klose will get into the Phillies. They've had a busy weekend as they're ramping up for the start of the baseball season later this week. Of course, we will have opening night of baseball this Thursday right here on 97.3 ESPN. Yankees and Nationals on Thursday. You can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. I also wanted to get into the latest argument on social media, shall we call it. So on social media, the big thing right now is what we're going to do with these awards. Because 4 months ago when the sport stopped, we really didn't think about MVP and defensive player and all these different awards before then. And now the league has come out and said, and Shams Charania was the first one I saw reported at least. Shams was saying the league has told people, look, you're going to vote on these awards, and it's based on what happened months ago. And I think that's a very interesting situation you're putting these voters in because, number one, some of these guys may not fully remember what even happened 4 months ago. The world has been so crazy, it's hard for you to maybe wrap your head around what happened 4 months ago. But to me, the most fascinating argument is for MVP. Most people would agree it's either Giannis or it's LeBron. Defensive Player of the Award, I would assume it either goes to Giannis or Anthony Davis. Rookie of the Year, it should be John Morant. Anybody voting for Zion is just being ridiculous at this point. He doesn't have the sample size to work with. And John Morant was incredible this year. I mean, he took a team that was projected by Vegas to win only 20-some games, and they blew that number out of the water already. So John Morant should be Rookie of the Year. Sixth Man of the Year, do we really care? I mean, Dennis Schroeder, Lou Williams, sure. But MVP is where it gets juicy. Because the argument I have every year is the MVP given to the best player in the league or to the most valuable player in the league? Because to me, it's not one and the same. A guy can put up amazing stats and amazing numbers, but he's not specifically benefiting his team. Whereas if you took him off his team for X number of games, they wouldn't be able to win games. Just because you put up great numbers doesn't mean that you're the most valuable player in the league. So between LeBron and Giannis, and I understand all the analytics people out there are screaming, well, per 36 minutes, Giannis is having one of the 5 greatest seasons of all time. And I hear all these metric numbers that everyone brings up, and I just kind of scratch my head and I say, okay, Giannis is having a great year. But here's what gets overlooked. Giannis was having a great year, but he was only playing about 31 minutes a game. So he's putting up these great stats, but he's able to basically coast parts of the game because he's on a team that can hold up without him. It's like the Raptors last year. Part of the reason why Kawhi wasn't in the MVP conversation last year is because the Raptors won a slew of games without him even on the court. And I think that when you look at Giannis and try to strip away all of the obsessive bias that comes with this, right? Think about it this way. The Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis on the court, averaged 78.1 points per game. Without him, they averaged 50.2 points per game. It's a pretty significant drop, 28 points. What about LeBron, though? With LeBron on the court, the Lakers averaged 83.9 points per game. Without LeBron on the court, they averaged 34.4 points per game. That's not a drop-off. That is diving off a cliff headfirst into the abyss right there. Also, LeBron, when he's on the court, the Lakers are much more efficient. The Lakers play better defense with him on the court. Without Giannis, the difference in offense is not that much. In defense, it's significant. Also, let's not forget the infamous plus-minus. Without LeBron on the court, the Lakers are minus 0.3. With him on the court, they're plus 8.1. I think that we undervalue the year LeBron is having because Giannis is having this incredible statistical season. I understand. If you run the metrics and the numbers, Giannis is having a year of all time. LeBron is leading the league with 10.6 assists per game. That's the highest in his career. When he's not on the court, whether it's the eye test or the stat test, the Lakers can't win without him. Meanwhile, the Bucks have shown that they can get by a few games here and there without him. They still have Chris Middleton. They still have other players on their team that can score, that can run the offense. Without LeBron on the court, who's running the offense? Alex Caruso? There's no A.V. Bradley for this playoff run right now. There's no Rondo because he broke his thumb. LeBron's probably going to play even more minutes than he played before the break happened. But I think there's an obsession over Giannis in the fact that he's put up this amazing season. And I'm not going to be mad if Giannis wins the MVP. But I think this idea that it has to be Giannis over LeBron, I think that you're overlooking the fact that there is a V in MVP. And I had this argument previously about the whole James Harden situation. When it was James Harden and Russell Westbrook years ago, to me, it should have always been Westbrook. Yeah, Harden puts up amazing numbers. He's arguably one of the 2 or 3 best scorers in the game today. But without Russell Westbrook, that Thunder team wasn't winning a lick. That Thunder team was probably winning, 28 games maybe without him? James Harden, phenomenal athlete, phenomenal scorer. And I think Giannis is a better and more impactful player than Harden is because Giannis plays incredible defense. And I wouldn't, be adverse for Giannis winning the Defensive Player of the Year. The guy guards 5 positions, and he has an incredible impact on the floor every night. But just don't discount what LeBron brings to the table. There are people out there who don't like that LeBron went to L.A. There are people out there who don't like the Lakers in general. They kind of treat the Lakers like the Yankees, It's the whole everybody hates the team that everybody else is supposed to like because they're a bandwagon jumper. Dude who's Lakers fan in part of the country where they shouldn't be a Lakers fan. Like, guy from Ocean City's a Lakers fan, but he's lived in South Jersey his whole life. That's just a bandwagon guy, all right? I get it. There's people that you look at and you're like, why are you a fan of that team? I think it's ridiculous that you like that team. It's a Yankee syndrome. But it doesn't mean we should take away from what LeBron is doing. The last player to lead the NBA in assists per game, who's LeBron's height of 6'9", it was Magic Johnson. In fact, in the last 40 years, there's not a player who's LeBron's height outside of Magic Johnson who has averaged double-digit assists per game. The assist leaders are traditionally guys who are shorter, smaller, playing the traditional point guard role. LeBron has taken his game to an entirely new level this year. And I think we got to give him a little more credit for that. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Again, Frank Klose will join us coming up at 125 to talk more about Major League Baseball. Get your text now, 609-403-0973. Tom from the Village chimes in and says, if anyone should have a good plan in place right now, it's the NFL. They were not under pressure to start the season like the other sports were. They had and still have time to improve what the other sports are doing. It seems like they're still in let's see what happens mode, as Tom from the Village. But doesn't that make it worse, Tom? For the NFL to be let's wait and see mode, and basically a week and a day before the quote-unquote official start of training camps. Rookies are reporting today. Shouldn't you have a plan in place already? To be in a wait-and-see mode feels like a disservice. And I think that's what makes it worse for the NFL. As you said, they have had time to figure this out. They see the other sports. Heck, they can see the mistakes the other sports made. The MLS is a perfect example. The MLS totally mishandled their testing program before they got to the bubble. And they quickly had to make adjustments because they didn't want their bubble to get infected. They actually had to tell 2 teams, you're out of the MLS's back tournament. And you guys can only start playing again when we go back to our regular schedule in August. Because remember, when the MLS is done this month with their tournament, they're going to go to the Major League Baseball plan, which is they're going to travel around and play in their stadiums and keep testing every day and hope for the best, basically, for lack of a better way of explaining it. Well, if anybody should look at the MLS plan and say, here's what worked and who didn't work, is the NFL. Where did the MLS fail? They failed because they had that specific number that the NFL has talked about and the players are concerned about. That 48 to 72 hour window of not testing. And because there was that gap in testing, you had those 6 DC players and those 9 Nashville players all en route to your bubble. And all of a sudden, before they entered the bubble and started playing, and before they were able to actually get on the field, there were new positive tests. And the MLS had to say, go away. And they said, well, we have to up our testing because that window that we thought we could get away with doesn't work. So if anybody should learn, it should be the NFL from that. Absolutely. 609-403-0973. We'll get more of your text messages coming up later this hour. But next, right here on 97.3 ESPN, Phillies insider Frank Klose joins us to talk about the Phillies weekend, the Phillies batting lineup, what is going on with the Phillies as they get ready to start their season. They're ramping up. Games Saturday, Sunday, and then tonight, Phillies are dealing with the Yankees in exhibition action. You're going to see a lot of teams in your time zone. That's the only good thing about this 60-day game plan. No West Coast trips. No 10:35 first pitches on the East Coast. It's positive, right? We'll get into all that and more coming up with Frank right here on the warm-up. Josh Hennig hanging out with you 1 to 2 on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hennig back here on the warm-up, 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your text a little bit later this hour, 609-403-0973. But joining me right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, as promised, Frank Klose, our 97.3 Phillies insider, joins to talk about what is going on with the Phillies. They ramp up for the start of the 60-game season in Major League Baseball. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm great. I love my Lincoln Park intro, by the way.
Well, I try to cater a little bit, so.
Thanks for that, buddy.
So one of the things this weekend was the Phillies were actually playing somebody that wasn't themselves. And I think the biggest thing that stands out for those of us watching and observing was, Frank, we saw 2 different lineups. So what does that even mean for the Phillies? Because it feels like Girardi is maybe not even sure himself what the batting order is going to be on day one.
Well, I tend to think of what you saw penciled in yesterday for last night's game at home is going to be the lineup. I think because it was a home game, because everybody's home and comfortable, because you knew that Scott Kingery and Andrew McCutcheon would walk off at their dinner later in the game, you knew that was probably what they were going to do for their lineup. And I think that the lineup last night was pretty well balanced with the lefties and righties, and I would not be shocked if that is what you see when opening day hits on Friday.
So then, considering that, do you think the Phillies are leaning Quinn or Hazley in center field then?
That's still kind of the question. I think no matter who it is, they're going to bat at the same spot in the lineup. I think they'll try to go with matchups whenever they think they can have a matchup. And I think that they like the idea, too, of Roman Quinn being the guy on second base at the end of the game on the days he doesn't start. If you go extra innings and you have to put a runner on second base. So I tend to think that it's kind of an open competition. I think they want to keep Roman Quinn healthy. We all know that he seems to get injured all the time with random things that are not connected to one another. But if you can keep Quinn healthy and potent the days he's in, if you can bring Adam Hazley along, see if he's a really long-term center field starting solution in your lineup, I think if you can do both of those things in this short season, I think that's a really good idea. And you never know the way things might lay out there with a day off here and there for some of the outfielders. Maybe you do see one of them in a corner here or there, but I think for the most part that's sort of the only open question on the lineup. I think you'll see a lot of both of them no matter what happens. And I think it's an opportunity for Quinn to show he can be healthy, what he can do when he's at least in the lineup a lot of the time. And same thing with Adam Hazley, who still is just coming up and trying to show where he belongs in the major leagues.
Speaking of a guy who's probably going to be consistently in the lineup, I'm very interested to see what the Phillies do with Jay Bruce, Frank, because I think the assumption is that he would be the DH. But obviously, I don't think it's going to be the DH when there's a left-handed pitcher out there. And also the possibility, if you're going to give other guys rest days, how they shuffle him around. So what do you think the plan is for Jay Bruce, not just on the days that they have a left-handed pitcher, but also on the days that maybe like a Rhys Hoskins or somebody else gets a rest day? Is he going to be the primary option?
Well, we got to talk to Jay Bruce last week on Zoom. He himself doesn't believe he should be a full-time DH, and I don't get the impression from Joe Girard that that's the plan either. I think what's going to happen is that he will be the natural recipient of there being a designated hitter. I think that'll happen like you saw yesterday where Andrew McCutcheon is a designated hitter. That means Jay Bruce can play left field. I would not put it beyond Girardi playing Jay Bruce at first base once in a while when Rhys Hoskins needs a day off against a tough righty. I can see Bruce in there maybe 70% of the time, no problem at all. And I think a lot will depend, too, with Alec Bohm. You tend to think that they're going to hold Bohm out a little bit as, perhaps a week's time is enough to save that entire year of team control. So depending on how Alec Bohm comes around, we saw Bohm play first base last night, which was something he looked very comfortable doing, by the way. I was a little impressed watching him play first base. So it kind of makes you think that they've been doing that behind the scenes a little bit more than we've noticed. So I think you'll see a lot of mixing and matching, and Alec Bohm is going to be part of the equation. And let's face it, it is a 60-game season, but somebody might have some sort of nagging injury at some point, and it's certainly a nice thing that you have all these options.
Frank Klose joining us here on the Boardwalk on a hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure following him on Twitter at Frank Klose. Frank, I think a lot of Philly fans were also, rightfully or not rightfully, extremely excited when Bryce Harper hit that monster shot off of Max Scherzer. So could Harper potentially be the key to the Phillies getting a hot start? Because we know they only have 60 games, Frank. There's no real margin for error here. So if the Phillies are seriously going to make a run, could Bryce Harper be the key to all of that?
Well, I'll tell you this. John Morosi, the very respected John Paul Morosi of MLB.com and MLB Network, he predicted today that Bryce Harper will be the NL MVP and believes he will lead the Phillies to a division victory. So, yeah, I think Bryce Harper really does drive the team. I mean, just the energy he brings and how he interacts with everybody, he seems to be that controlling force. So if you do get a big season out of him, you naturally think that the Phillies around him are going to do very well, and it certainly doesn't hurt that they have a pretty deep lineup for the first time in a while. There's no real holes in the lineup, and you're probably talking Adam Hazley / Roman Quinn combo as your 9-hitter. and Scott Kingery is your 8 hitter. So I think it's going to be really easy for him to have a lot of opportunities to come up with some big hits this year. And certainly you would think that a year later, after joining the Phillies, he's a lot more settled in than he was coming to a new team late in spring training last year. And he seems like he's very well at home in Philadelphia. And that sense of comfort, I think, really does set him up for a big season because, once you get over the new team unfamiliarity, the jitters that come with that, this became Bryce's team. I think that was clear during the season last year. And I think more than ever right now, this team does as Bryce Harper sets the tone for. So big year from him. I think he's in a good spot for it. He's in his prime. It's a short season, so he knows he can sort of just put the foot in the accelerator and go. I can see him having a really big season.
Interesting, because I know that Harper is also, according to the betting experts, he's not one of the highest favorites. He's plus 1,800 as of this weekend to win NL MVP. So, hey, listen, if
that might not be a bad bet.
Well, listen, I was going to say if Morosi's serious, maybe he should cross the bridge and come over to Jersey and put his money where his mouth is. Then, right? I mean, I'm just saying that's. Listen. I personally thought Harper had a chance to win the MVP last year, Frank, but obviously he had some struggles at times. It might be a benefit for Harper that he has a 60-game run instead of 162. There's less margin for error. Maybe it helps a guy like him zero in even more.
Absolutely. The fact that he was down, he wanted to take the trip to Washington, D.C. Now, most of these road games for spring training games or summer camp games, a lot of the veterans just simply opt out of them. But he said, no, send me down to D.C., put me up against Max Scherzer. He comes up big with the 3-run home run. So I think he is locked in and ready to go.
I like hearing that. The one interesting bit of news also came out over the weekend before we get to the pitching, Frank. I want to hit on this with you. So the news came out on Saturday that Logan Forsythe, Francisco Liriano have been granted their release, and Neil Walker has made the Phillies opening day roster. Now, I always was curious about how the Phillies were going to handle the situation because it felt like, while Forsythe may be able to play more positions than Walker, I think some people might have felt like that Walker may be at least a better hitter right now in this stage of his career than Forsythe. So what are your thoughts on the Phillies picking Walker over Forsythe?
Well, I thought Walker always had the edge. The one thing that he is that Forsythe is not is a switch hitter. And, you're going to want your extra men right now, especially with a designated hitter. You want somebody that you can plug in however possible, whether that's at the plate or in the field. Walker has mostly been a second baseman. He looks fine at third. He can play first base. I don't remember if they throw him in the outfield. They might have done that too. I can't remember early in the spring. It feels like which was forever ago. But I think Walker is versatile enough that the fact that he's a switch hitter as well kind of gave him an edge. And Forsythe, I honestly thought he looked pretty good. In fact, I was wondering if there'd be a way the Phillies would be able to carry all three, him, Walker, and Josh Harrison, another veteran bat who looks like he's got a shot to make the club now. But I think it's going to be numbers issue. You can't add too many players to the 40-man roster without starting to cut some of your prospects. Now, there might be some people on this 40-man roster that are prospects that really don't have a chance to factor into 2020. Well, you don't want to cut them now because you need a utility player. So I think that's why you saw Forsythe get cut. I don't think he did anything to deserve getting cut. It was just kind of a numbers crunch there. And they have plenty of other options. I mean, even beyond him, the likes of Phil Gosselin. Gosselin's a guy that's usually going to start your year in AAA and at some point comes up and can help the team in a meaningful way. And that's probably the type of role he's going to have. Curious, he'll probably start out the year hanging out in Allentown at that alternate location and work out at Coca-Cola Park, and then the Phillies might have to call upon him at some point. So it's easier to get a guy like that to accept that kind of assignment than it is somebody like Logan Forsythe, who's got a little bit more of a track record. And of course, he was a Dodgers second baseman for a few years there, even as the Dodgers were getting pretty good. So nice player. He will probably help somebody. That's just a numbers issue with the Phillies.
Could it also be, Frank, a side effect of the fact that we have a DH now and there's no pinch hitters? Could that maybe be affecting the Phillies roster decisions as well?
Oh, absolutely. You do use pinch hitters when you don't have a designated hitter. when you do have a designated hitter, and often it's because you like the matchup better late in the game. And you know what? It might be an issue where late in the game they would prefer that a left-handed Neil Walker bat against a tough righty instead of Scott Kingery. Or it could be that a right-handed Neil Walker, again, he's a switch hitter, is a better option than Adam Hasty late in the game. So I think you want that type of player to be somebody who's a little bit more versatile, and Walker can kind of jump in on the left side or the right side and have a nice, strong veteran, disciplined at bat late in the game, and you might see him switched in or out that way.
Frank, let's flip over to the pitching, because I think the biggest question I have right now is what's going on with Zach Wheeler. We knew his wife was going to be giving birth this month, so the baseball season is supposed to start in a few days. What's going on with Zach Wheeler?
Well, I here's one thing. I wouldn't read too much into in terms of the rotation permanently, but Vince Velasquez is going to get a start next, and I think the idea behind that is not that he's going to be the number 3 starter behind Nola and Wheeler. I think it's that he's going to be set up to be ready when it's Wheeler's start in case Wheeler has to go on the paternity list. So I think looking at how the things are playing out, it could be that that's what they do. They have Velasquez ready to go Wheeler's first start, and if Wheeler is able to make the start before his wife gives birth, then he makes a start. Then meanwhile, they can bump Velasquez back a few days, and then maybe get Pivetta ready to go for that other spot, or however this is going to play out, because we don't expect to see Spencer Howard at least right away, but I think he would be there soon. So I think that's why you're seeing things set up now. The Phillies are aware of it. There was some talk about whether or not Wheeler felt comfortable, coming into a season with the new child and coronavirus being a reality. But I think one thing I am at least sort of observing, and this is just my gut, is that now that people are here, they're getting tested. I think they feel more comfortable than they did perhaps when this was all brand new and they didn't exactly know what they were getting into when they walked into summer camp.
So you mentioned Velasquez being prepared for the Wheeler maternity situation. So what is, in your eyes, the delineation for if anything else happens? If a guy gets injured, we always know that there's always concern with pitchers and injuries, or if someone tests positive. Is there like a lineage or like a delineation of like, okay, if Wheeler goes down, then Velasquez comes in, and then if Arrieta goes down, this guy comes? Like, is there any type of, you think, like order in that way?
I do. I think that was the idea that they had, and they've actually said as much, that they were kind of thinking that there would be a backup starter for each day, and then somebody up in the Allentown location at Coca-Cola Park that would be available to jump in and start if you absolutely needed it. And I think that you'll see, for that reason, opening day roster, you'll see somebody like Cole Irvin on it. You'll see Daniel De Los Santos on it. There's an extra person from the Velasquez Pivetta group, at least one extra, provided there's no paternity leave that's going to affect that. Or Spencer Howard will be in the mix. So I think that's how they're going to set up their 30-man rosters. That they have a few guys that can jump in and start. They seem pretty comfortable with Nola, no problems there. So I don't know if they have the flexibility to have 5 other starters ready to go at the moment, but you'll see the ones that came deeper into games sort of trying to be paired up with somebody else to jump in if they need to, and that's what they'll do when they have the extra pitchers. That the rosters will begin with 30 instead of 26. We'll have the opportunity to go down to 28. So I see them probably keeping the likes of Cole Irvin and Daniel De Los Santos around to try to be those longer arms in the bullpen.
Just big picture, Frank, that you mentioned the fact that they only have 5 guys that all can step in. But is that maybe where teams in general are going to start using maybe the trades? And that is, if there are some serious injuries or there are some issues with their rosters, maybe that's where the trades come in before the deadline, that people say, listen, I don't have enough bodies to cover this many injuries or this many issues with my team, and maybe that is where the trades are used instead of just the traditional making your team better.
Yeah, I think that the trade deadline will be very interesting to watch, because you never know what team might have a positive COVID test, or somebody put on the COVID list for any of the other reasons you could be put on the COVID list, and they're going to have to respond to it. typically, if somebody has an injury, they try to take care of it at the trade deadline. Now, this is extra interesting because it's all the way on August 31st, which is less than a month till the end of the season that they're going to have the trade deadline. So, be really interesting to see here. And then I think the bigger question too will be, with only 60 games and no teams being that out of it, who's not going to want to trade their pieces? So that's another thing you have to consider as well. That you might not have as much available at the deadline because, a team after if you're basically talking, you have 25 games left when you have a trade deadline, and if teams like 2-3 games out, which of course spread out over a longer season might be a 7 or 8 game deficit. If you're 2 or 3 games out, you might say, maybe I can hang in there a little bit, and maybe I can make something happen in the division. So they might not be as willing to do trades. So this will probably depend on the teams that are way out of it, and it might even be hard to make the case that even in the National League East, where Miami is generally not in the conversation, they might not be that far out of it that they're willing to trade a piece.
Frank, before I let you go, I got to ask you about the big baseball story from the weekend that's not Phillies related. The Toronto Blue Jays, at least for this year, are not going to be the Toronto Blue Jays. I know they have a spring training facility in Dunedin, Florida. I know they have the AAA facility up in Buffalo, though the AAA facility apparently has lights issues in the outfield. What's going to happen to the Blue Jays, Frank? Do you have a feel on what's going to happen, and what do you think is the best option for them?
Well, I honestly believe that a month ago, 6 weeks ago, they felt that they would be able to play in Dunedin. Right now, given Florida being essentially the hot spot for coronavirus in the United States, I think they have other thoughts. My dear friend Baseball Betsy, as she goes by online, some of you may know her or follow her on Twitter. She lives in Dunedin. She was on the board that helped put together the Dunedin facility that got redone this year. She saw them installing the lights, and they had legitimate lights installed so that they could have major league quality play. I think they're more likely to go to AAA Buffalo or AA Hartford at this point because I don't know if the players feel that safe going to the Tampa area. But that's still a possibility. At least if you're in the Tampa area, the teams that play, the Blue Jays and the Rays, can do both in succession.
Yeah, then what do we do then? We just do we still call them the Toronto Blue Jays, or do we call them the Buffalo Blue Jays? Like, is this I remember years ago in the Expos. Remember they had to play in Puerto Rico for a little while there. I mean, what do we do with the name of the team here?
I guess you got to keep it the same. Their advertisers will be wanting a piece of wherever they are. So their fans back home, I know, would still love to see the Toronto Blue Jays, but unfortunately, they will not be in their home country.
He's Frank Klose. Follow him on Twitter at Frank Klose. Of course, he's also our Phillies insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, co-host of the Powder Blue podcast. As all guests, he appeared today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Frank, always appreciate the time.
Always good to talk to you, Josh.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to text board coming up next, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Josh Hennig back here on the warm-up 97.3 ESPN. Get to your text in just a moment, 609-403-0973. But I can't let that walk. That John P. Morosi predicting Bryce Harper to win the NL MVP. Plus 1,800 odds? I mean, that sounds like an incredible deal right there. I mean, I don't understand why it's plus 1,800 though. Like, think about this list here. Christian Yelich is the number one as of yesterday, plus 350. Mookie Betts plus 550. Ronald Acuna plus 700. Cody Bellinger plus 700. Juan Soto plus 1,000. Then you got Nolan Arenado, and then you got Bryce Harper. Doesn't it feel like that's a little low for Harper? Like, why does it need to be that low on the list? Like, do I really believe that any of those guys are going to have that much better of a year than the other? This is a 60-game stretch. Like, how are we going to have a difference there? By the way, Broach thinks he's all slick here in the studio changing the channel to Premier League soccer. Like, I really care that much, Broads. You're acting like you're all slick over there, like you're sneaking over, grabbing the remote, like you're a 15-year-old stealing the remote from your dad over here.
Well, it's the first time I went for this move. You know?
No, it's not.
Well, I snuck around and did it while you're on the air. I might have done it when you were off
You've
the air.
done it before.
On air.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then I don't even remember what I do anymore. I know you're not big on soccer. Maybe you wanted to keep on what you had on.
I'm not big on soccer. I just think it's funny how you went about it.
The sneak?
Yeah.
Did I have a smirk on my face?
You did.
I felt that smirk. I did. It's a big game, Josh.
Is it?
Everton.
I don't even know who Sheffield United is.
Everton is my Philadelphia Eagles.
That's fine. I've actually heard of Everton. I've never. You know what? Was that Gary Sheffield's team? Sheffield United.
I don't think so. Although Kevin Durant is part of the Union now.
I know that. Yes, I know I know that LeBron's got a stake with Chelsea.
I don't know what team it is.
It's Chelsea or Liverpool. One of
Might be Liverpool. For some reason, Liverpool sticks out to me.
He's got an investment stake in them.
Now you're going to watch the Union tonight at 8:30, 8 o'clock.
As long as it's not on Univision again, I'll be fine.
I think it's on ESPN.
Okay, then I'll watch it.
Okay.
Listen, and I'm as someone who does try to give things a chance, I'm actually been giving the MLS like a really fair shake. I've watched a good chunk of these games, but when it's on the Spanish channel, I can't do it. I just can't. I can't get around it because for me, I want some sort of background noise. And if it's in another language that I'm not very fluent in, it's not doing much for me.
What other language would that be other than English, Josh?
Literally English. Just I know English and I know enough Spanish so if I got stuck into a Spanish country without any resources, I could survive. That's really it.